Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to decode the mechanics of effective group work and online learning. Look, if you spend any time at all in education or instructional design, you've definitely heard the terms collaborative and cooperative learning tossed around, usually like they're the exact same thing. But actually, they're incredibly different. By the end of this, we're going to completely nail down the distinction between the two and see how picking the right one can absolutely transform your learning environments. Let's get right into it.
Here is our quick roadmap for this explainer. 1. Decoding group learning. 2. The roots of group work. 3. The ultimate showdown. 4. Strategies in action. And finally, 5. E-learning and final thoughts.
All right, part 1. Decoding group learning. What exactly is the difference?
I want you to think back to your last group assignment. You know that universal sense of dread it probably caused? Maybe you wound up doing literally all the work while your teammate just color-coded the title page, or maybe you just felt totally lost in the shuffle. Group work definitely has a bad reputation, but you might be surprised to learn there are two entirely different, scientifically backed approaches to fixing it. You see, the problem usually isn't the students. It's that the instructor just used the wrong framework for the task.
At their core, these two methods are night and day. Collaborative learning is this informal, student-structured setup. It's often entirely voluntary for the people who are genuinely interested, and the participants organize their own efforts to reach a common goal. They're totally in the driver's seat. Cooperative learning, on the flip side, is a compulsory, teacher-structured activity. The instructor divides the groups up and assigns very specific roles and tasks to each individual student to make absolutely sure they cross the finish line.
Moving on to part 2, the roots of group work. Shared DNA, diverging paths.
So both of these theories actually share the exact same theoretical DNA. They both originate from the early 20th century social constructivist Lev Vygotsky and his famous concepts called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. ZPD is basically just the gap between what a learner can do completely on their own and what they can pull off with some guided assistance from a peer or a teacher. Both of our frameworks are built on this foundational idea that social interaction is the magic key to pushing learners into a higher zone of understanding.
But from that shared foundation, they actually developed into formal practices on completely different continents. Collaborative learning was championed by George Jordan over at the University of Glasgow in Great Britain. Meanwhile, cooperative learning was pioneered in America by two brothers, David and Roger Johnson, at the University of Minnesota. So we've got two different continents and two very different ways to get students working together.
Which brings us to part 3, the ultimate showdown. Collaborative versus cooperative.
Let's break down the orientation first. In collaborative learning, the approach is 100% student-oriented. The teacher takes a step back and acts purely as a hands-off facilitator, leaving room for student-centered discovery. Now, in cooperative learning, the teacher acts as a hands-on director. They manage a teacher-oriented activity, meaning they are actively, constantly involved in guiding the group toward a very specific academic outcome.
And naturally, this orientation heavily impacts the structure of the lessons. Because collaborative tasks are built to tackle complex, open-ended problems that might not even have a single right answer, the structure stays incredibly flexible and informal. This is a sharp contrast to cooperative learning, which operates under very formal, rigid, and directive conditions framed specifically by the teacher to hit exact milestones.
So, who is this actually for? Well, the high level of independence and self-regulation you need for collaborative learning makes it a perfect fit for adult learners and mature students. Conversely, the highly structured, role-based nature of cooperative learning makes it incredibly effective and really appropriate for young, school-going children who still need that rigorous step-by-step guidance.
We also see a massive split in how resources and grading are handled. Collaborative students supply and share their own source material, and uniquely, they often assess their own individual and group performance. Cooperative students, however, rely entirely on the teacher to supply the fundamental reading materials, and it's the teacher who evaluates their final submitted work at the end of the lesson.
All right, part 4, strategies in action, taking it from theory to practice.
When we look at collaborative strategies out in the real world, they rely heavily on deep, student-led discussion models. We're talking about case studies where groups analyze complex proposals, team-based learning for group consensus, and a really fascinating method known as the fishbowl debate. The fishbowl debate brilliantly illustrates this collaborative philosophy. Here's how it works. The class is divided into 3. One group on the right argues in support of a topic, a group on the left argues against it, and a third group sits right in the middle. But this middle group doesn't argue at all. Their sole task is to independently evaluate the facts, synthesize the arguments, and present a final evaluation report to the entire class. It's completely student-driven analysis from top to bottom.
Flip the coin to cooperative strategies and things get highly regimented. Methods like the jigsaw technique, gallery walks, and the three-step interview are specifically engineered by the instructor to ensure that every single student participates equally. There's no hiding in the background here.
The three-step interview is a perfect example of this rigid yet super effective structure. Step 1. A student interviews a partner within a strict time limit. Step 2. They reverse roles and repeat. Step 3. 2 pairs combine into a 4-person team to share the findings they just gathered. The teacher has essentially engineered a scenario where active participation from every single student is absolutely mandatory to get the job done.
Now, interestingly, you might have noticed one strategy that bridges both of these methodologies. Think, pair, share. It's the ultimate crossover tool. The teacher presents a high-order problem. Students first think about it individually, then pair up to discuss their responses, and finally share their outcomes with the larger group. It borrows the structure of cooperative learning, but it demands the high-level analysis and synthesis of collaborative learning.
Finally, Part 5, E-Learning and Final Thoughts.
So how do we bring this into the digital space? Well, designing effective collaborative e-learning requires us to merge those foundational ideas from the past with our modern digital reality. We take Vygotsky's century-old idea of guided group problem solving and we combine it with recent tech-driven theories like connectivism to make it actually work on a computer screen.
What's really fascinating here is the modern concept of connectivism itself. Developed pretty recently by George Siemens and Stephen Downes, this theory teaches that in the digital age, learning isn't just a solo endeavor stored away in one person's head. It's about networks. It's about using technology to recognize patterns and connect highly specialized sets of information. Collaborative e-learning activities use technology as the ultimate bridge to forge these connections between scattered learners.
Which brings us to our most important conclusion. The crucial takeaway from this explainer is that one method isn't inherently better or worse than the other. They are just different tools for different jobs. Collaborative learning is your go-to tool for higher-level synthesis, open-ended problem-solving, and mature audiences. Cooperative learning, that's your master key for foundational skill building, ensuring accountability, and guiding newer learners.
So, the next time you're tasked with designing an e-learning module, or leading a team project at work, or teaching a class, I want you to ask yourself this critical question. Are you going to be the hands-off guiding facilitator of a collaborative journey, or will you be the directing, hands-on architect of a cooperative mission? Choosing the right approach literally makes all the difference. Will you be the guide or the dictator? And more importantly, what happens to your learners if you choose the wrong one? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.